our series, everyone say 3 beautiful words. 3 beautiful words. No, I meant like you could say 3 beautiful words.
Love.
Okay.
Pokemon is amazing.
We can go home. 3 beautiful Pokemon is amazing. I was just messing with you. No, but that's awesome. See, this series and our hope as we go through these, we're looking at 3 different words. And last week, did anyone remember what our first word was? Invite, that's right. And so tonight we're continuing, everyone say belong. Belong. That's right. And so what we see as we make this transition is that as we invite people, we want them to be a part of the family. But here's a question I got for you. Have you ever walked into a church and felt totally lost? Yes. Anybody? Okay. Just show of hands, I'm just curious. And there's no shame. There is no shame in that. Like it happens, I think, to everybody, especially when you go there for the first time. Now, I kind of mean like as lost as in you had no clue what was going on. Maybe it was where to go. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to like a mega church before. I've been to New Spring up in South Carolina. That we were driving by and I saw this warehouse and I'm like, man, that thing's huge, just in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, oh, that's the church. I'm like, what? This thing is massive. Thousands and thousands of people go there every Sunday. And I'm just like, mind is blown. Inception. But maybe you've gone to a church and were lost and you had no clue what was going on. Maybe that's happened. You're like, what is happening? Okay, I told some of you guys before, this will correlate with a couple of things. I went for one of my school classes at Point University. It was called a cross-cultural experience. And basically what that means is I had to go somewhere where I was uncomfortable. All right? So I went to this monastery that's in Conyers. Anybody ever been? Anybody? To be honest, it's a beautiful just sight. I don't really know what to call it. Just the place in general is awesome. They make their own bread and cookies. It's so good. It's so good. They make bonsai trees, because who doesn't need a bonsai tree in your life, right? Just a little baby tree, little baby tree. But anyway, so I go there, and I get there, and I find the sanctuary, and I'm like, man, this thing is awesome. But all these monks are walking around with their hoods on, chanting in Latin, and I'm like, this is like some horror movies I've seen. Not today, not today. I was a little lost. But here's the thing, it's kind of cool about different churches all across the world, is that every single one of them are telling a story. Now, and that changes from church to church. At the monastery, for those of you who have been, you can probably relate. The ceilings are just incredibly high. It's just, the acoustics are incredible. Everything in there is made with the utmost design and beauty. And so the high ceilings kind of portray a picture of God's infinite power, and we see in the stained glass windows the stories of what Jesus did in the miracles. And it's just really cool. But then we go to a church like ours, and we have lights, and we have a full band doing their thing, and that too tells a story. When we start off, we have high energy music, and the lights are going, because we're celebrating what God's doing in our life, yeah? Because anybody like to jump and dance? Woo, I can't dance, but I try, it's okay. Thank you. We are back. Yes. I love it. Yes. It's awesome. But then we move from the flashing lights to, it kind of tones down. They maybe turn blue, and it lets the crowd know that we get to a more somber moment. We're being more, we're remembering and reflecting. And that's great too. Or maybe anybody love a hype playlist like some Jesus, do the Jesus lean. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to get people excited. Some of you are like, please don't ever do that again. But that's the thing, churches do things differently because they're telling a story, and whether we realize it or not, the buildings we worship and all over the world tell a story. But here's the thing, and this can be good and bad, we too tell a story as attenders. And sometimes the stories that we tell are not always the most positive. But here's the thing, God has designed the church, us, to tell a story. It's one of the most important stories that we could ever tell. And just like last week, we're going to see that there are 3 beautiful words for tonight. But we're going to do something different, all right? So I need everyone's full attention. Because we're talking about belonging and inviting someone to the table, I have a very special friend tonight who is going to come and take part in this, and her name is Miss Jordyn Hall. I need you guys to give her a big hand. Come on up here, Miss Jordyn. Tag team.
Hey guys. Hey. So, every Sunday, there's about 100, maybe even 1,000 people that will visit church for the first time, but most of those people decide not to come back. And they don't decide that decision while they're at worshiping, like, this worship kind of sucks. Or even during the message, like, I really don't like this pastor. Or even when they get home and they start thinking about the message and the worship, they're like, I just really didn't like that. They decide not to come back within the first 5 minutes or less, which is point number 2 on your outline. 5 minutes or less. Within the first 5 minutes of entering the parking lot, so many things can go wrong to make a person not want to come back to church. For example, finding a parking spot. There could be nobody outside of the parking spot telling you where to go, and on this day, everybody and their brother decided to come to church, and you're like, oh, great. So you have to circle the parking lot 3 or 4 times to find a decent parking spot. And by the time you get to one, you're so stressed out, and you just sit in your car, and you're like, okay, and then you get out, and then something else goes wrong. You have no idea where to go. You literally, you couldn't even see the doors from your car. So now you have anxiety on top of stress because you don't know where to go. So you're just kind of like freaking out. You're like, I don't know where to go. I'm going to be late to church. Like, I never do this. Like, why am I even here? I'm just going to go home. And then you finally make it inside. And from the stress and the anxiety, all you want is for someone to talk to you. And that doesn't happen either. You sit there and you're walking into the sanctuary, and you see these people, and you see this one person, and they look like they're about to talk to you, and you brace yourself. You're like, oh, they're about to talk to me, and then they just walk right by you. And then you go your other way, and then you see another person. You're like, oh, they're for sure about to talk to me. Like, they're coming my way, and they walk right by you again. And this just keeps happening over and over. And by the time you get into service, and by the time you're ready to enjoy it, you can't, because you just feel like you don't belong. And I'm sure some of you have felt like you don't belong in church before because you're like, well, I did this thing a long time ago, or I used to be involved with this, or I used to be involved with this drug, or I did this last night, so I shouldn't really even be here. And honestly, those are just excuses. And maybe even it's not that intense. Maybe it's just because you don't feel like you're welcomed here, or that you are appreciated, or that you're missed when you're gone. And that should not be the thing. As the church, we are supposed to welcome people with open arms when they walk in, no matter what the rumors say about them, no matter how we feel about them. Even if they are the worst person walking the earth right now, we are supposed to welcome them with open arms because Jesus would. And when we do that, we make people feel like they belong. And some people will just make excuses like, well, I really don't like people, and talking to people stresses me out, so I just don't want to. Or, well, that's really the connection team's problem. Like, I'm not on the connection team, so I don't really have to talk to them. Or maybe I come to youth because I want me time, and I want to get closer to God, and all this stuff. And those excuses, while they may seem valid, they're not. And I can make those excuses seem unvalid with just 2 words, which is Rocky IV.
He grabs Rocky Balboa by the throat, Balboa picking up the Russian and throws him to the ground like a wrestler. It's a gutter war, no holds barred in Moscow. Rocky may be on the receiving end so far, but he's here to fight. This is shaping up to be a personal war, and right now, it's anybody's boxing match.
You're doing good, Rocky. I could do better myself.
Beer the glass. That's what's all.
You got him hurt bad.
Yeah.
Now he's worried. You cut it. You hurt it. You see? You see? He's not a machine. He's a man.
Nieprawda. Opak, kuzok, żelazo.
Winning more than he does. No pain.
No pain.
No pain.
No pain.
No pain.
No pain.
Okay, take it to him. Take it to him. Take it to him.
Doing great. Mighty long way, baby.
Now, I'm sure some of you are probably asking yourself, why did I just watch this ridiculously awesome video of Rocky fighting Drago? Well, there's more to this video that you probably don't see. And there's probably more to this video that you wouldn't see if you didn't look it up. What you didn't know is that before they filmed this scene, Sylvester Stallone asked Dolph Lundgren to actually try to knock him out. And that probably wasn't the best idea. So while they were filming the scene, within the first few punches, Rocky started feeling this burning in his chest, and he chose to ignore it, which, again, probably wasn't the best decision. In an interview, he was like, after the third take of body blows, I felt a burning in my chest, but ignored it. Later that night, I couldn't breathe very well, and they took me to the emergency room. The next thing I knew, I was on a low-altitude flight from Canada to St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, and there I resided in intensive care for 8 days. He struck me so hard in the chest that my heart slammed against my breastbone and began to swell. So the beating became labored, and without medical attention, the heart would have continued to swell until it stopped. Many people that have car accidents die like this when the steering wheel slams into their chest. So in a sense, I was hit by a streetcar named Drago. Now, you're probably still like, what? I don't get it. You never know what is going on inside somebody's head or what's going on inside somebody's, life. They might come to youth to get people to talk to. They might come to youth because they feel so empty, and they're like, well, maybe this is just my last resort. Maybe I'm going to find someone here that's going to really treat me like they care about me, and someone who's going to really love me and all this stuff. And where you may come to youth just to hang out with friends, other people come to be seen and to be heard and to feel like they belong. And you're probably still asking, well, why should I care about what these people think about? Why should I care about what they're going through? And the answer is, as the church, we are supposed to care. Jesus put us on this earth not for ourselves. He put us on this earth to care for other people and to get other people to feel loved and to feel like they are loved by the Creator himself. And with all that said, I'm going to ask Tim to come back out and finish up the message.
All right, let's give Jordyn another hand. Italian stallion. I love me some Rocky. Okay, my favorite part of that entire scene is his coach right at the very end. He goes, did anybody notice that? It's yeah. I love Rocky. But what Jordyn said is so true. It's easy when we come to get caught up in everything that's going on with ourselves, and it's easy to forget that we exist to give other people an opportunity for a better life. And so tonight we're going to see in our Bible story this guy who is a perfect example of kind of this internal trauma and external trauma too, that he didn't choose, but God makes it right by him, and I think it's pretty cool. And his guy, let's everybody say his name, Mephibosheth. Try saying that 5 times fast. That is tricky. Biblical names, sometimes you're like, what? I had a professor once tell me, look, if you don't know how to say it, just own it in your wrongness. It'll be okay. I mean, it's tough. But Mephibosheth, point number 3 on your outline, I want you to go ahead and write this down. We're going to get to this in a little bit. It means shattering shame. It's a pretty cool name. Just walk around, hi, my name is Shattering Shame. Pretty epic. But this guy, Mephibosheth, let me kind of give you an idea of what his family life was like. Mephibosheth's grandfather, I'm just going to call him M. Is that okay? For all of our sakes, because I'm going to get it wrong at some point, and it's going to be butchered and it'll be bad. So M's grandfather was this guy named Saul. You probably have heard of Saul in the Old Testament. He was the very first king of Israel. Saul started off strong. I mean, he's doing everything that God asked him to. He's winning all these battles and victories. And it's just great. Until finally he kind of moves away, and Samuel the prophet says, enough is enough. It's time to find a new king that can lead Israel. And that's when our homeboy David comes into the scene. You guys like David and Goliath, right? Okay, so David is chosen by Samuel, really by God, and he's going to be the next leader. But here's something that's kind of cool. I don't know if you can kind of see, it's kind of faint here from our lights, but a shadow is kind of cool. Anybody, like, as a kid, did you love, like, I don't know about you, I pretended like my shadow was this person chasing me, and then it would scare me. I'm like, I got to run faster. It's still closing in. Like, anybody? I was like 12. No, I'm just kidding. I was like 5. Just playing. No, but our shadows are cool, and just in general, because here's the thing about them, though. They don't really show us exactly what it looks like what that form is, but you can get a basic outline. You might not get the colors, and you might not get everything that's going on, but you get an idea of what you're looking at. David is a shadow of who Jesus was going to be. And so we see something happen with David in just a moment that's going to give us a picture of what Jesus was going to do for us. So David enters the scene of Saul's life, and it's evident from the get-go that God has great plans. He fights Goliath, takes him down with, anybody remember what weapon? Okay, that is pretty epic. He didn't walk in with a sword or a spear. He went, I got to rock. Bam, right in the forehead. I mean, like, game over, sucker. And then he cuts off Goliath's head. Pretty intense. He slayed thousands of Israel's enemies, and for the first time in a while, Israel enters this period where they're not constantly watching their back. And Israel loves this underdog, this kid, David. Saul has a son named Jonathan. And unlike his father, Jonathan loved David like a brother. They were, just best friends for life. And you would think that Jonathan would be jealous, because as the prince, normally what a prince would ascend to the throne, right? Yeah. So you would think, like, David's going to be the new king. Well, that means I don't get to be. You would think he'd be jealous, but he's not. He makes a promise to David saying, I will protect you and your family as long as I'm alive. And David does the same for him. Finally, Saul had enough and tried to kill David, but Jonathan saves his life. In a desperate attempt, he helps him flee, and God was with him in the exile as he's trying to escape Saul. And that's where Mephibosheth comes into our story. This was Jonathan's son, and he grew up with his grandfather Saul, telling him how evil and dangerous this traitor named David was. He was going to ruin everything. He's like, Mephibosheth, or one day you're going to be king. But if David gets to the throne, you'll never get your shot. So you have to imagine he's got some ideas in his mind of how bad David's going to be. And over time, Saul's spirit weakened, and his enemies of Israel surround him, and in a terrible moment, Saul dies, but we also see Jonathan die, David's best friend. I know, right? Just a bad day. Mephibosheth's nurse takes him, and she's trying to run away because he's only 5 years old at this time. And this is just sad. Your dad and your granddad just died. Well, she drops him and paralyzes him. Talk about a bad day. Right? Your world just changed. Oh, well, now you can't walk either. It's like, okay. So he grows up paralyzed, and he's hiding away because as David becomes king, he's remembering what he's been told by his grandfather. If David ever catches you, you're dead. So he's always on the run watching his back. And one day his fears come to fruition. David's soldiers come to his house and take him, and brought him to the now king who he grew up fearing. Mephibosheth, we see, we're going to, on your outline is verse 7, but we're going to go a little ahead and read this so you can follow along on the screen. Then King David sent and brought him from the house Machir to the son of Amiel at Lo-Debar. I'm telling you, sometimes you just got to wing it. And the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. We continue on. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, behold, he's got to be terrified. Absolutely scared about what's going to happen next. I am your servant. And David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan, and I will restore you to all the land of your Saul, your grandfather, and you shall eat at my table always. It's kind of crazy. Because back in the days of kings, if there was someone of a royal lineage before you, you would kill them. They all have to die because they could try to take your throne away from you, right? I mean, it just makes good sense. Knock out your enemies while you can, because then they can't take the throne away. They can't take your power. But David does something pretty incredible. He could have just said, Mephibosheth, you don't matter, you're dead. But he invites him to his table. Now catch this. Saul was anybody remember? Saul was a king. Do kings have a lot of land? Do they have lots of possessions? Like lots of gold, like all that kind of stuff, right? David doesn't just say, I want you to come and be a part of my family. He says, I want to give you back everything that belonged to your grandfather Saul. That's incredible. That doesn't happen. We do not see that kind of kindness often, even in today's world. People don't just, oh, well, I'm sorry that everything bad happened to you. Here's everything you could ever imagine and more, right? People just don't do that. But David had made a promise to Jonathan, and he kept that promise. And he knew that Mephibosheth, had been suffering his whole life from this fear. What's going to happen next? Could I die today? I don't know. And he wanted him to know that he belonged at a king's table, not in a wasteland. Remember how I said that David was a shadow of what Jesus was going to be? If you're here today, I want you to know this. You've been brought forward into the presence of King Jesus. And even though we all deserve death and rejection and nothing good, he instead has made room for us at his table. We are Mephibosheth. And like we said, in the Hebrew, his name means shattering shame. So we all, at some point, maybe even not tonight, we all carry shame. We all have done things that we don't want anybody to know. We try to keep them secret as long as we can. And here's what I want you to know. You can try to keep stuff secrets. It eventually comes to the light. It just does. But this is what is so important. God knows everything you've ever done. And it doesn't matter. What matters to him is what you do next. We're all at this pivotal moment, and I said this morning, and I think this is so powerful. Failure is not a person. Failure is an event. Every single one of us are going to fail because we're human, whether we want to admit that or not. We mess up. But God's grace, his love for you, extends beyond any of the mistakes you can make. He is inviting you tonight to his table. He takes our shame, and he literally breaks it into pieces and says it doesn't matter anymore. I want you to come sit at the table with me. Tonight, our takeaway point is this. If you don't remember anything we said tonight, I want you to get this. You belong here. You belong here. And here's the thing, you might maybe sometimes you're like, man, I just come here. Okay, well, that's great, and we're so glad you're here. I want you here every week. And I hope that you like being here, that you enjoy the people, the fun we have, the discussions that as we grow together. I hope that. But you know what's even better than that? The fact that you belong here. We want you to know that there is a place at the table for every single one of you. Why? Because someone did it for us. Jesus has offered us an incredible opportunity to belong. It's one of the greatest gifts we could ever receive for the church, but the gift is not for us to keep for ourselves. So tonight, I've got two next steps for you. I've got two things that everybody in this room, one of these things applies to you. And the first one is this. On your connection card, I want you to check this as if this is you. I want to belong by accepting Jesus for the very first time. Maybe tonight you're like, Tim, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I don't understand all of this faith stuff, but here's what I know. I'm hurting. I need something. Tonight, if that's you, I want you to know that Jesus is waiting with open arms, and he's sitting at the table, and he's like, come to the party. There's cake. There's cookies. But more importantly, it's a table of love, and he wants to give you far more than you've ever earned, far more than you ever deserve. Any of us have. He wants to invite you into his family. So if that's you tonight, I want you to check that box, and I want you to tell someone tonight. Maybe it's family member, maybe it's someone here, maybe it's me, whoever. If you make that decision for the first time, we want to celebrate that because it's the best decision that you'll ever make. It will change your life forever. Now, if you already believe in Jesus, you're like, okay, what do I do, Tim? On your connection card, right underneath that, I want everyone, if you are a believer in Jesus, you need to do this tonight. This is everyone's responsibility. It says, I will bring blank to the table. I want you to think there's probably one person that you can invite to come to the table. Maybe it's someone you haven't seen here in a while. Maybe they've been busy during the summer and you just need to say, hey, come on back to the table. Maybe it's someone that's never been to church before ever and you're like, hey, I want you to know that there's this really cool place where you can come hang out and you get free pizza. It's legit. Come and hang out at the table with us. Every one of us has an obligation. If we say we follow Jesus, we get the greatest honor of inviting people to the table just like Jesus invited us. So tonight, I'm going to pray, and the band's going to come out and worship and lead us in some worship. My hope for every one of you is that you know that you belong here. I know some of you better than others, but I want you to know this. I love each and every one of you. Some of you don't even know that well, but here's what I want you to know. We adults, we care about you. We want the best for you. And I hope that you know that you belong here just like you belong to Jesus. Let's pray. God, I thank you for the greatest gift of belonging. We have never deserved your love, but you always give it freely. You're always willing to share with us. And so tonight, I just ask that we would live that lifestyle. Because when we live like we belong, we don't just show up and hang out. We don't just show up and talk to a few people. We live like our lives have been utterly changed. Everything is made new when we belong. So tonight, my hope for every single person is one, that they know that they belong, God. I just ask you to help them feel that, but more importantly, that they belong to you. Thank you for your love. We thank you so much for all that you do for us, God. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Y'all come worship with us.